welcome to MMG's podcast. I'm Ryan and I'm joined today by Paul Cook. And Paul, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, I'm a content creator and producer.
Excellent. Okay, so obviously that's a little bit vague. Maybe we need to drill down a little bit more as we go. What we're going to do first of all, I think is probably a good idea, is just to let people know what we're talking about. So this is all about virtual and hybrid event production.
Yeah.
So what we've been working on for the last, how many years now? Like 4, 5 years? I don't know. Now, we think that the future is hybrid and virtual events. The space for just in person now isn't really where things are going to stay. I think that there's been so many changes since COVID.
Yeah.
That the whole space is completely different. So obviously, virtual hybrid is an important topic. It's something that has changed massively because of, the need really. Like obviously when COVID came, let's just say vMix wasn't really the go-to solution for productions.
Yeah.
And that's like the smallest of changes really. Maybe it's a good idea if we just talk about our journey, because we've worked together now in a lot of different contexts. And I think that might open the doors to sort of other ideas and also for us to sort of explore some other topics. So one of the companies that we worked for in the past, early part of COVID, was to solve a problem that they had. It was for a company in the medical industry, and they needed to connect globally at a time when you weren't allowed to travel out of your country.
Yeah. Now,
that was difficult because nothing existed at the time. But we made a system to do that, which was awesome. But there was a lot more that went on in the background, because I think people might recognise that MMG would work in the context of production technical solutions.
Yeah.
But when we work together, we deliver something different.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe you could sort of explore around that a little bit and tell people about what it is that we do when we work together that is different.
Yeah, I think it's what we tend to get involved in more complex cases, which is good, which is what we like. But I think there's almost a simplicity about, just plug the tech in and it'll be fine and everything will work. And that's all you need to do. But it goes, as you were saying, way beyond all of that, because you've got to make sure that everybody's aware of what they need to be doing at any given time. So if they're a speaker that's going to come on, they have to be ready, on time, tested, all of those kind of things before you can put them into the live mix. And understanding what a client's looking for, and then kind of going through, well, yeah, that'll work. Maybe this won't so much. And then talking to you guys and working out what will work just means that you're doing more than just a plug and play.
And actually that reminds me of seeing a number of things where people have completely ignored the online audience. Yeah. So they've been on stage talking and they'll ask a question.
Yeah.
And the question will be, how many X things do you think are important? And they'll almost do a really old school, can you raise your hand to tell us if you think yes, no, 1, 2. And you just think of all the people online watching, especially when you look at the figures and the people in the audience, for example, say 200, and the people online are more like 10,000.
Yeah.
And it's like you've just pushed them away.
Yeah.
Which is, it's a no-go, isn't it?
There was many, many times when virtual hybrid were first kind of coming around, where people would be on stage and they would do that. They would say, welcome to the virtual audience. They'd name check them once in maybe a 2-day program. And you have to consider those people that you cannot see are giving their time, their energy, they're investing in being available to, take part or, consume some of that content. And when you get an event and it is put together in such a way that you can have interaction between both sets of delegates, it makes such a huge difference. And that's where all the complexity comes around.
It sort of ties in with what we were saying earlier, before the podcast, in terms of inclusivity.
Yeah.
Because it's so important that everyone is included in obviously this day and age, but not just to say that you want to tick a box, but actually there's a lot of people that have got a lot of input and a lot of value that are not necessarily contributing to a company because they feel that their place is to sort of stay at the lower ranks and they can't go to these events or they can't access the building. You have hearing loops, that's a legal requirement to adhere to. So at the same time, should it not be that every single event, if it's in person, well, that instantly becomes hybrid every time?
Yeah, I think there'll be a number of events that need to go that way if that organisation is still going to carry on and be almost valid. Because how can you just close people out? COVID opened the door to everybody being invited into an event because the only thing that needed to happen was that you just took a web link, logged on, and you could take part. But now, when we're back to in person, if we're saying that all of the people that would have been virtual delegates are not entitled to be there anymore, then you've just slammed the door shut. You've basically just said, no, we don't want you anymore. Thank you very much. And that just feels so wrong, especially when, as you say, there are so many differences that people bring that can help all sorts of projects and companies and society in general. So
yeah. And I think my sort of viewpoint was thinking about more employees and the organisation, but actually it goes further than that, doesn't it? Because if you isolate your customer, well, that's like, number one, don't do that. And that's just going to affect the business in a massive, massive way.
Yeah, if we're not using the technology that's available to carry on doing what it did during the COVID time, then that's a massive opportunity missed.
It's questionable about what the right thing to do is, because obviously person-to-person contact is important. And for like an annual meeting or like an awards, saying well done, congratulating people, that sort of engagement is important for it to be in person. Not to say that it shouldn't be streamed and accessible to everyone. We'll probably come back around to that actually, because that's pretty much one of the things we did within the medical, the global thing. I mean, maybe we could just go down that now, to be fair. So we had an award show within the whole, week-long event.
They had awards to recognise their superstars, and it was right that they were recognised, because when COVID was on, it was a lonely place for a lot of people. You were either isolated, couldn't go anywhere, and still having to do your job. So to have recognition was really important. So there were different countries had different laws in terms of what you could or couldn't do. So that meant that some people were able to get together in small groups, but in other countries you couldn't do that, or maybe the person wasn't next to anybody else. There could have been a little cluster. So they basically would be in our home office and attending awards.
Yeah.
But
all suited and booted.
Yeah.
So it obviously meant something to them.
Yeah.
It was important that, they got dressed up even though they were at home.
Well, I think our biggest challenge, Ryan, was the client had said, we're not telling anybody who's won an award.
Yeah.
So your job on the night is to catch them in the moment where their name's announced. So we put together a whole awards, presentation, and that was all good. But at the moment when the name of the winner was announced, we had to capture that. So they could either be in a group or individually in their home. And we did it.
Well, I just had another flashback to to the medical event that we did, where we connected everyone in that way to say about their awards.
Yes.
And I also remember seeing the face of one of the presenters from like a site, a location.
Yes.
And how amazed they were that everyone just appeared, like as these winners were announced.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But the way that it connected them, like I remember one of them literally grabbing a drink, running up to a camera to celebrate.
Yeah.
And it felt like the other room in a totally different country was part of that moment with them. Yeah. And that was where it was like, wow, the hybrid thing's got legs, basically.
It does. To my mind, it's too easy for planners or organisations to say, right, hybrid came along, it's done, it's dead. It isn't. It hasn't even got started yet. I mean, it was back in 2010 when I first started experimenting with what hybrid could look like from a kind of planner perspective. And that was interesting. But nothing really shifted until we had the ash cloud, the volcanic ash cloud that got in the way of Europe. And then obviously when COVID came along, and I just hope that people don't lose the momentum to keep pushing forward and to keep realizing that actually, if we talk about things like climate change, the need to be sustainable, the need to include people, the need to provide accessible events, all of it is connected with what we can now do.
Well, we said in the events industry, like from a production side, because people will be like, well, you know, what's going on? How are we solving problems? And it would be, well, basically, we've shifted technology about 5 years forward within the space of 3 months. Because everything changed. Instead of needing a switcher to go in a live production and deal with something, what we needed was a way to ingest signals from everywhere, edit them in real time, and turn it back out. You know, like it was totally different concept, which is obviously what vMix is. And I know people use, you know, all different things.
So just on that though, Ryan, to an event planner, do they need to understand what a vMix machine is?
No.
Right.
No, not really.
Sound, video, people coming in remotely, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the whole thing. But to the point that we can pre-program and execute really complex things in what is, from our world, a much simpler way. Nice. And we've been doing a lot of training for vMix as well, actually, like in-person training. And again, it's just the question of, what does this do? And then it's actually, the question is not that. The question is, what do you do? Because if you do audio or if you do video or whatever, the perspective is different. So, you know, you might reskill from being audio to do vMix, for example, but equally, you might use vMix to play all the audio stings for an award show. You might use vMix to cut between 3 different cameras for a main output. Like, there's so many parts of technology that it can replace. But the actual limitation is more to do with the human function, remembering that the operator has got a brain, like one. And if you compile everything onto one person, then the show will go wrong. So it's knowing where to partition things. Really. I wish I could go sort of more in depth, but it would just get super techie.
Well, I think that's okay. I mean, you know, you give me the reassurance when we work on projects that you are always ahead of whatever's coming down the wire next, and just know that things have changed. Even since we started working, there have been, you know, equipment that is no longer useful, but you're on to whatever the next thing is.
Yeah, and you've kind of got to be. That's the deal, isn't it?
But I think for me, the most important thing when we first started working together was about the redundancy. The redundancy of something fails, goes wrong. What do you do then? Well,
that's my.
And then you had about 4 or 5 different answers.
Yeah, it's literally that's one of the things that I sort of put major importance on. Like when we've done a show. So for the insurance sector, let's just go with that. Very big global event, and I mean this is like months ahead. And between myself and our technical staff, like we were literally drilling, what happens if?
Yeah.
And that question was never met with, oh, don't be silly.
Yeah.
Like anyone that had a what happens if, we then explored that to decide what would happen if, you know. Having 3 layers of backup on the internet is obviously quite a good idea because it's not as reliable as everyone thinks. Otherwise, everyone would be having a stable connection, 1 gig everywhere. Yeah. And it's not the case. Even obviously, like, you know, you sign up for your stuff at home. It's not really 1 gig. If it says it's 1 gig, it means it's sort of all controlled and you get throttle and things like that. But, you know,
but yeah, redundancy was always a big thing. And especially if you've got a client, well, we know we've got a client that's insurance. They're going to want to know more than anybody else. But it won't go wrong.
But that was one of the things for me that was, well, still is, like getting kicks out of designing something to execute that, you know, and actually having a challenge, not just, let's hook up some speakers today, or like, let's see if this video stuff works with a cable connected to it, but actually to, you know, start with the concept of what you're trying to achieve and almost to not acknowledge whether it's possible or not based on the rules you've already got. And then that's where I get massive kicks. Like, it's, you know, feels good. And I think from your point of view, like you obviously get kicks out of doing it. Like it's a genuine thing, isn't it? You know,
it is when you have clients and you know that they are they're demanding because that's just the way that they need to be, because they've got a lot of people to give a different experience to. But I think, you know, for me, when things just not just work, but when you see the development of somebody that suddenly realizes that actually they're in safe hands, not in funny hands, but just safe, you know, we're taking care of you. But they go on stage or they go on screen and they just deliver because they've got all the faith that it's all going to work. And they have pushed themselves up into, this is good. This is all working.
Them getting comfortable, isn't it?
Yeah. Once they've done that, then they just move on. And that it impacts on the whole event, on the whole production.
I think also it might be worth dropping in that one of the things you do is obviously actually guide people and advise them on their journey with presenting. So that was definitely a no.
Yeah.
Maybe, not my area of expertise, but from your point of view, like you analyse and guide them and things like that.
You're right. When I said I was a content creator and producer, I didn't really give you much to go on.
No, too many hats.
But sometimes it's hard to describe what you do. But I basically help people, brands, companies, get their message out in whatever way they need that to be. So it could be prepping speakers to go on stage or to be on screen. Doesn't matter. It could be that somebody says, look, we want you to write about this particular issue for our audience. So I write a lot of things about what's going on in the event space because there are companies that can't always talk to their audience. They don't realize it until they think, well, we need to get somebody in to do that. So that's another thing.
Well, in a way, this is what this is about.
Yeah. Guests on podcasts. We've had some amazing guests on podcasts, but some don't pause for breath. Some will just keep going. They will be 40 minutes and they haven't drawn a breath. And you think, there are no edit points. Rarely edit points for the producer. And also some will just say, they give an answer, but it's too jargonized. And that's no good to people.
Yeah, because obviously if they're listening, then in theory, well, I suppose maybe they might be an expert in the subject, but at the same time, they're probably not. They probably are exploring and wanting to learn more. Yeah. It's the idea, isn't it?
And people do have fallback expressions that they inadvertently put in. They don't realize until they've listened to the recording. One of my favorites is, I've got somebody that says that all the time. And you can't get away from it. And we had one chap where he was naming a company every other word. It was like too much. Mm-hmm. So we just had to edit and chop and do all those good things. So I try to help people as much as possible. What is the core message? What do you want people to come away with after you've spoken, after you've written? What do you want them to do?
But this is like the idea of having all these things, isn't it? So virtual, hybrid, in person.
Yeah.
Do you just do a pre-record? Do you do a podcast? Like looking at the big picture of what they want to achieve kind of lets you in on their whole program.
It does. And it means that you can give advice, especially depending on what their restrictions might be. So maybe they're in a country where you can't travel at the moment. Maybe getting visas is an issue. So you might say to them, look, let's do a podcast series. Mm-hmm. Let's just help you structure it, create it, structure it, invite guests, all of those kind of things. Mm. Or it may be that you go to that country and you record, you capture them wherever they are as part of a conference. Or you might do a number of vox pops. You could do it. I mean,
it's about being creative, isn't it, with what you've got available, rather than just going, yes, this is pretty much the 80s, 90s. You're going to go to a venue, there's going to be 4 speakers and a projector screen, and it'll be great.
Yeah.
Because it won't be, will it, really? No.
And also, there are more people that want to be involved in having their voice heard at events. Mm-hmm. The idea of a panel that goes on for 45 minutes where you have, say, 5 of those minutes open to floor questions, it's just nonsense.
Yeah, it is.
Or talking heads and everybody's bored.
Sometimes just being immersed in the topic that you like, isn't it?
Yeah.
Literally just hearing the words of things that you sort of empathise with, and perhaps like, your day-to-day experience sort of echoes.
Yeah, it could be. It might set you up for the day. It might be something that just gives you a break from whatever task you've been doing. Mm-hmm. It could just be that you want to spend 10 minutes outside and this little podcast comes along and it's just perfect because...
Right place, right time.
Yeah. But you don't need to be attached to a screen. You can just put your ears in and that's it.